We got a top 20 matchup on CBS in Iowa City. The number 9 Ducks taking flight to see the 20th ranked Hawkeyes on Saturday. CFP implications with this also being the first Big Ten meeting between the two programs, so it should be interesting. But the Ducks have gone undefeated in their last 10 road games, the nation's current longest road win streak, while Iowa's winless in the last 11 games against a ranked opponent. Speaking of that, take a look at what Dan Lanning has done since taking over there out west versus ranked opponents. Pretty solid, 11-7, points per game, just over 32. But against unranked 31-0, that's great. But the problem is Iowa has that little number by their name. For more, Erik Skopil and David Eickholt join us here from 24/7 Sports. And fellas, I want you to dive into this with us on Saturday because it can make or break for either side here depending on the outcome of which team wins this. But Erik, for Oregon, what's at stake for the Ducks?
Well, this has been a really interesting season where you get the highs of non-conference play, not unexpected. A lot of ranked teams, no numbers against, next to those names, and they took care of business. They did what you expected them to do. They go out to Penn State, big win there. I think people kind of started to, there's a little coronation week, I said, afterwards in the bye week. Maybe this is the best team of the country. Is this a national championship contender? Are they a little ahead of schedule? And then they lay an egg against Indiana. Don't look very good against Wisconsin before this previous bye week. And they go into this month of November here, really kind of in a prove-it month. Number 9 in the debut CFP. I think that seems about right. Obviously still control their own destiny. But this weekend's game against an Iowa team that also has CFP aspirations now, it feels like a really big prove-it week for an Oregon team that is still young, still a little bit unproven, and now with an opportunity to take its show on the road.
Yeah, I think for Iowa, it's winning you're in essentially, right? It's a huge opportunity against why I think it's the top, 5 team in Oregon. I think Dante Moore is one of the best quarterbacks in college football. But for Iowa, obviously they've lost 11 straight games against ranked teams, and a lot of them have been in dominating fashion. Iowa has not simply been able to compete. Now, I do think they have a competent offense this year, right? And who would have thought? Mark Gronowski, the South Dakota State transfer, comes in, and Iowa's rushing attack under second-year coordinator Tim Lester is moving in the right direction. But Iowa still needs that marquee win. The march to the CFP starts now with Oregon. If Iowa can beat them, they have to go on the road next week at USC, and we know how the time change can be a factor there. But this is probably one of the more balanced Iowa teams that they've had in the past decade. I think Iowa's defense continues to be elite, but it's simple. There cannot be any more slip-ups. Indiana, obviously top 2 team in college football. The Iowa State loss is definitely lingering, considering they've dropped 4 straight. But this is a big prove-it game, I think, for Iowa, and to kind of uphold that Kinnick Stadium trajectory of knowing how to knock off top 10 teams.
It's interesting. Both of them, their best wins coming against Penn State, so obviously that doesn't matter anymore based on what we've seen from the Nittany Lions. Whatever the over-under may be on Saturday, I think the folks at home will like this. You want to hammer the under. I'm not a betting guy, but it's just safe based on what we've seen from these defenses here. You expect it to be a low-scoring affair, but, David, safe to say whoever gets to 21st could win this game.
Yeah, I think that's an accurate assumption. I have two mindsets about this game, right? If the game comes down to speed and athleticism and making plays in space, it's going to be Oregon's game to lose. If Iowa can muck it up, if they can make it as gross as the weather is going to be, if they can make it snotty, if they can make it physicality at the point of attack in the trenches, then I think Iowa's going to have the advantage here. You look at Iowa's offensive front, what they've done under George Barnett. All 5 starting linemen are ranked in the top 10 overall linemen in Big Ten play by Pro Football Focus. Logan Jones has been an absolute staple. They have a mobile quarterback. Iowa, I think, went from the least athletic quarterback room in college football. Obviously, again, now they have Mark Gronowski, who has 11 touchdowns on the ground this season. But this is going to be a very interesting game. The weather is not going to be good, but I know some Oregon fans still feel pretty confident in their passing attack. But this Iowa defense does have 8 interceptions here over the past 3 weeks, but it all depends on how this game starts out. If Oregon punches Iowa in the face first and Iowa can't immediately respond, Oregon's a team that knows how to thrive and capitalize off their own momentum.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that David just made there in terms of the early momentum of this game, because this is an Oregon team that is built to score, has the explosive offense, one of the most explosive offenses in the country. If you go over yards of 20, plays or plays of 20 yards, I should say, plays of 40 yards, Iowa's defense is great at limiting those. They take those plays away. And to me, that's kind of the chess match here. Can Will Stein, Oregon's offensive coordinator, find ways against Phil Parker, one of the legendary defensive coordinators, to find some explosives, to find some ways to get going early, to set the tone, to build some momentum? This is an offense that has struggled in Big Ten play early. They haven't scored on their opening drive in conference play in 5 attempts yet, and they've turned it over on a couple of those series. That can't be the way this game starts, especially if the weather is going to be what we expect it to be. We saw Oregon's last game against Wisconsin was a game where they only scored 21 points, and weather played a big factor. Second half, they basically played in a monsoon. If it's going to be similar on Saturday, I think it's imperative that they play with an advantage, with the lead early, and it's a matter of can they go out there and do that early.
We just saw the defensive numbers in terms of what they put up in terms of 13 and 0.1 and 5 between the two. So that brings me to the point about the quarterbacks. You got two different styles here, but Erik, what should we be watching from Dante Moore? And now you add the weather as a possible thing as well.
Mm-hmm. The weather part is interesting because Dante was knocked out in the third quarter about 3 plays in against Wisconsin. I think a lot of people, myself included, had a curiosity of how he would handle playing it because the weather really picked up in the second half there. Brock Thomas, a walk-on, came in, finished the game pretty admirably. Only 4 pass attempts in the entire second half, though. I think a lot of people wanted to see how Dante would handle the poor weather. Did not play well in the first half of that game, did not play well against Indiana. Moore is a guy who, when everything is working and he's in the right fits, is as dynamic and dangerous as anybody in the country. The question to me is, what does it look like when that's not the case? And Indiana's defense threw some things at Dante Moore that he just didn't look ready for, kind of young quarterback syndrome. How does he look against Iowa, a defense that is very disruptive, that has a lot of Sunday players up front, and that is known to throw some things at young quarterbacks? I think that's my biggest point of curiosity. If it looks and it works out and everything can be kind of within the structure of the offense, I don't think there's any question Dante Moore and this offense can find some success. But if Indiana's game plan and blueprint kind of is rolled over by Iowa and they can kind of, put their own fingerprints on it, so to speak, I think there's any question that Dante's kind of got some questions to answer in terms of how he handles this. And coming off the bye week, I think you hope that there's been some corrections made.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, too, because Iowa typically is the team that sits back and lets opponents make their own mistakes, especially with young quarterbacks. That has not been the case this season. Iowa has continued to ramp up its blitzing. I look at Xavier Wampa, the former 5-star by 24/7 Sports. He's been doing a lot of blitzing. Cohen Entringer, the opposite safety spot. Iowa's also mixed and matched a lot of different defensive linemen. So I do think they're going to try to disguise a lot of coverages to make Dante Moore make some mistakes. But for Mark Gronowski, I mean, the guy is just a winner. He's a gamer. Only had one offer at any level coming out of high school to South Dakota State, and he became kind of a folklore legend, guys. I mean, he's up to about 12,000 all-purpose yards throughout his career. He's the winningest quarterback in college football history at any level, sitting at 55 right now. I know the passing offense has not been where Iowa wants it to be. It's certainly not what Mark Gronowski thought it was going to be, but he is continuing to recover from that knee injury he suffered against Indiana, and that's a big reason why Iowa ended up losing that game to Indiana. He was knocked out for the final 10 minutes. If he stays healthy, guys, I think Iowa probably would have had a pretty decent shot at knocking them off. But for Gronowski, he's a guy who knows how to rally his troops. He's the ultimate leader under Kirk Ferentz. There's a lot of belief in what he can do. And again, this is a guy who's won 2 FCS national titles. He's won an FCS equivalent of the Heisman Trophy. He's been dynamic on the ground this season. And ultimately, he's a guy that the team can get behind. And he runs like a fullback. Iowa offensive coordinator Tim Lester compared his running style to the great Tim Tebow. And you watch him, he really does not shy away from contact. He will more than happily run over an opposing secondary or a linebacker. Don't think he really wants to try that against Bear Alexander or a couple of the Oregon defensive linemen, but he's a guy who's fearless and he will do whatever it takes to win. But obviously the lights don't get much brighter than what's going to be in Kinnick Stadium on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, QB1, by the way, 8 straight games with a rushing touchdown. He's used the legs a lot, so we'll see if that pans out in the possible snow there. You mentioned Kirk Ferentz, 70 years of age. There's a 31-year gap between him and Dan Lanning. But you've been around him here, David. What's been the difference, or maybe the same, in terms of the way he's led this team this year?
Yeah, so interesting fact, guys. Last time I think Oregon came to Iowa was 1989. Kirk was coaching offensive linemen. Dan Lanning was 3 years old. So that just shows how the game's continued to evolve here. But, I think for Kirk, he just sort of has had a renewed sense of energy. I do think he was close to retiring after the 2020 season, I think. But once he got a glimpse of what retirement would be like, once everything shut down before the season got started late, he looked around and he said, I don't really have any hobbies. I don't really do anything else but coach football. So I think that kind of has reinvigorated him to embrace NIL, to embrace the transfer portal. And he's more of a CEO, and he doesn't have to handle a lot of the other materialistic side of things. I think Tyler Barnes, Iowa's general manager, has done a great job in continuing to step up his game. But Kirk's as energetic as ever. I'm not going to be surprised, guys, if he ends up signing another contract before his career's over. I think he's still going to be around for another 3 or 4 years. He's going to continue to make that Big Ten wins record almost unbreakable, because if you ask me, guys, I just don't think we're ever going to see anything like Kirk Ferentz again. At times Iowa fans have been a little bit testy with them. After the 2014 season where they went 4-8, there were a lot of calls to fire him. He came right back and had a perfect regular season, 12-0, ended up at 12-2. But Kirk's as energetic as ever. He's as feisty as ever. And I have been very, very impressed with the way he's continued to adapt. He will adapt. Probably takes him a little bit longer than a lot of fans would like, but he's always gotten it done. So, again, I'm not going to be surprised if he sticks around for another few years.
210 wins there in Iowa City. That is a big deal for the 70-year-old. Of course, they'll be on the sideline looking for another 13 consecutive winning season. Speaking of that game, we have to get some predictions. And, Erik, since you're making the trip, I'll let you have first word.
I'm fascinated by this game. I think you're right that low score is the expectation, especially with weather concerns. I like Oregon to bounce back, though. I know it sounds weird, bounce back, coming off 2 straight wins, but Wisconsin was kind of an unsavory game. It was a game I think you're just kind of happy to get over and win. I think that's kind of what this game is, to be honest, right? Like, I don't think it's going to be pretty. I don't think Iowa plays a style that allows you to play kind of the way you want. Like, right, it's kind of a throwback game here. I've likened it to when Oregon was in the Pac-12 with Stanford about 10, 12 years ago, where you're playing all these spread offenses, the high-scoring games, trying to win the 30s and 40s, and then here comes this opponent that just wants to muddy the waters, wants to play in the 20s. I think that's what Iowa's going to try to do. I think Oregon's more adept than people want to give them credit for playing a game like that, though. Better in the trenches than people want to give them credit for, bigger, stronger than people want to give them credit for, and a better run game than I think people realize. Actually second in the Big Ten right now, one of the top 10 rush offenses. Even if the game it ends up being who can run better, I think Oregon has a chance there to make it work. And ultimately, I think Dante Moore, this is a prove it game for the team. I'm expecting him to come through big as well.
So first of all, guys, I'd like to congratulate everybody sitting here for having more punt return yards than Oregon's allowed this season. Oregon's allowed -1 punt return yard this season, but Iowa also has the most dynamic return man in college football in Caden Weigent, the Jet Award winner last year. I think he's going to win it this year. I think he's going to be a first-team All-American. Erik and I talked on our podcast. I think Caden Weigent's going to have a big return against Oregon. I'm very intrigued about if there's a bad punt, if they don't have proper coverage. If Caden Weigent gets the ball, guys, he's as fearless as anybody in college football. I think he has maybe 45 to 50 punt return yards in this game, an anomaly compared to what Oregon's allowed. But that's that hidden yardage, that 45 to 50 hidden yards. I've gone back and forth all week about it, guys. I think Iowa gets it done. I have them winning 23-20. I think Iowa's offensive line's been so stellar this season. I think they have a shot at the Joe Moore Award. I think Iowa's going to do a little bit to make Dante Moore uncomfortable. But again, if Oregon punches Iowa in the mouth first, I do think it's going to be a little bit more difficult for Iowa to come back. But this is the same Iowa team, but it's a different Iowa team. They've won games in ways we haven't seen them in the past couple of years. They're actually blowing opponents out from time to time instead of waiting to the last possible minute to make it a 2-score game. They're holding the ball in offense. They're controlling it, having methodical drives. They're fully healthy at running back. And I'm going to trust the all-time wins leader, Mark Gronowski, to make just one more play than Dante Moore on a probably very, very liquid, courage-infused crowd inside Kinnick Stadium.
That's only right. That's how it should be on a Saturday at 3:30 Eastern. David, Erik, appreciate it. Of course, split decision. We don't get that too often here. As always, appreciate it. We'll see how this pans out on Saturday at 3:30. As I mentioned, big time in the Big Ten. Top 20 matchup, CFP implications for both sides. Dante Moore, what are you going to do on the road Saturday on CBS and Paramount+.